The Error of Free Will, from the Twilight of the Idols by Friedrich Nietzsche. The error of free will. Today we no longer have any pity for the concept of quote-unquote free will. We know only too well what it really is, the foulest of all theologians' artifices, aimed at making mankind quote-unquote responsible, in their sense, that is, dependent upon them. Here, I simply supply the psychology of all quote-unquote making responsible. Wherever responsibilities are sought, it is usually the instinct of wanting to judge and punish which is at work. Becoming has been deprived of its innocence when any being such and such is traced back to will, to purposes, to active responsibility. The doctrine of the will has been invented essentially for the purpose of punishment, that is, because one wanted to impute guilt. The entire old psychology, the psychology of will, was conditioned by the fact that its originators, the priest, at the head of the ancient communities, wanted to create for themselves the right to punish, or wanted to create this right for God. Men were considered quote-unquote free so that they may become judged and punished, so that they may become guilty. Consequently, every act had to be considered as willed, and the origin of every act had to be considered as lying within the consciousness. And thus, the most fundamental counterfeit in psychologics was made, the principle of psychology itself. Today, as we have entered into the reverse movement, and we immoralists are trying with all our strength to take the concept of guilt and the concept of punishment out of the world again, and to cleanse psychology, history, nature, and social institution and sanctions of them, there is, in our eyes, no more radical opposition than that of the theologians, who continue with the concept of a quote-unquote moral world order to infect the innocence of becoming by means of quote-unquote punishment and quote-unquote guilt. Christianity is a metaphysics of the hangman. What alone can be our doctrine? That no one gives man his qualities, neither God, nor society, nor parents and ancestors, nor he himself. The nonsense of the last idea was taught as quote-unquote intelligible freedom by Kant, perhaps by Plato already. No one is responsible for man's being there at all, for his being such and such, or for his being in these circumstances or in this environment. The fatality of his essence is not to be disentangled from the fatality of all that has been and will be. Man is not the effect of some special purpose, of a will and end, nor is he the object of an attempt to attain a quote-unquote ideal of humanity, or a quote-unquote ideal of happiness, or a quote-unquote ideal of morality. It is absurd to wish to devolve one's essence on some end or other. We have invented the concept of a quote-unquote end. In reality, there is no end. One is necessary. One is a piece of fatefulness. One belongs to the whole. One is in the whole. There is nothing which could judge, measure, compare, or sentence our being, for that would mean judging, measuring, comparing, or sentencing the whole. But there is nothing besides the whole, that nobody is held responsible any longer, that the mode of being may not be traced back to the causa prima, that the world does not form a unity either as a sensorium or as a spirit. That alone is the greatest liberation. With this alone is the innocence of becoming restored. The concept of a quote-unquote God was until now the greatest objection to existence. We deny God. We deny the responsibility in God. Only thereby do we redeem the world.